In 1654, two French mathematicians, Blaise Pascal and Pierre de Fermat, began exchanging letters about a gambling problem. They weren't trying to build wealth. They were trying to solve a simple question: how do you fairly divide the pot in an interrupted game of chance? That correspondence is widely regarded as the birth of probability theory. For the first time in history, humans began systematically thinking about odds, expected value, and uncertainty in mathematical terms. Centuries later, those same ideas would quietly become the foundation of how we invest. Today, we're going to explore ETFs, not just what they are, but the statistical reasoning and probability concepts that made modern investing strategies possible. We'll look at risk, reward, and why certain approaches have historically given everyday people better odds of building wealth. An ETF, or exchange-traded fund, is essentially a basket of investments you can buy and sell like a single stock. But the idea didn't appear out of nowhere. For most of the 20th century, the average investor faced a difficult choice: either pick individual stocks, high risk, or pay high fees for mutual funds with mediocre results. Then, in the early 1990s, ETFs emerged as a solution, combining the diversification of mutual funds with the flexibility of stocks. The intellectual roots, however, go back much further. In 1952, a young economist named Harry Markowitz published a paper that would later win him the Nobel Prize. At the time, most people thought about investments in isolation. Is this stock good or bad? Markowitz asked a different question: how do assets behave together? He introduced what became known as modern portfolio theory. Markowitz showed, with mathematics, that combining assets that don't move in perfect unison could reduce overall risk without necessarily sacrificing returns. This was revolutionary. He gave investors a framework to think about diversification not as a vague idea, but as a measurable strategy. His work on risk and return became one of the core foundations for how ETFs are constructed and used today. Broad market ETFs in particular are practical applications of Markowitz's insight. Instead of trying to pick winners, own a little bit of everything in a way that balances risk across the entire portfolio. While Markowitz gave us the theory, it was John Bogle who brought these ideas to everyday people. In 1976, Bogle launched the first index mutual fund at Vanguard. He believed that, over time, most active managers fail to beat the market after fees. His solution was simple but radical: own the entire market at the lowest possible cost. Bogle's philosophy was deeply influenced by probability and statistics. He understood that markets are largely efficient, an idea later formalized by economist Eugene Fama through the efficient market hypothesis. If markets are mostly efficient, then trying to beat them consistently is like trying to beat the odds in a game where the house has a small but persistent edge. When ETFs launched in the 1990s, they took Bogle's index fund concept and made it even more accessible. Now anyone could buy a diversified portfolio with one trade at very low cost. This wasn't just financial innovation. It was the practical result of decades of statistical thinking about probability, costs, and long-term outcomes. Let's connect this history to the actual numbers. When Carl Friedrich Gauss developed the normal distribution in the early 1800s, the famous bell curve, he gave us a way to understand how returns tend to cluster around an average. In investing, this helps us measure volatility, or how wildly an investment swings up and down. Later, concepts like standard deviation, correlation, and the Sharpe Ratio gave investors tools to quantify risk and reward. These aren't abstract ideas. They're the reason we can compare an S&P 500 ETF to a sector ETF or a bond ETF and have a rational discussion about which one offers better risk-adjusted returns. The key insight from probability theory, going all the way back to Pascal and Fermat, is this: you cannot eliminate uncertainty, but you can understand it and position yourself accordingly. This is why broad diversification through ETFs often beats concentrated bets over long periods. It's not because diversification is exciting. It's because the math of probability favors spreading risk when your time horizon is measured in decades, not days. This brings us back to that original gambling problem from 1654. Smart probability thinkers don't ask, "What's the highest possible return?" They ask, "What combination of outcomes gives me the best chance of reaching my goals while surviving the bad outcomes?" This is the same reasoning that makes low-cost, broad-market ETFs powerful. They don't promise the highest returns in any given year. Instead, they improve your probability of acceptable long-term results by minimizing unnecessary costs and avoiding the behavioral mistakes that come from trying to outsmart the market. Most people lose not because they lack intelligence, but because they treat investing like gambling without understanding the odds. They chase high returns without accounting for the increased probability of large losses. The history of investing is really the history of humans learning to think more clearly about uncertainty. From Pascal and Fermat's letters about gambling, to Markowitz's mathematical framework for portfolios, to Bogle's practical application for ordinary people, each step improved our ability to make decisions under uncertainty. ETFs represent one of the best tools we currently have to apply those centuries of insight. If this way of thinking about risk, probability, and long-term results resonates with you, I've created a simple ETF starter checklist that helps you apply these concepts based on your own situation. You can download it for free using the link in the description. If you found this valuable, subscribe for more videos that focus on the why behind financial decisions rather than just chasing returns. Thank you for watching, and remember, the goal isn't to win every round. It's to improve your odds over a lifetime.